Hello and welcome to another Geek private practice interview. I am very excited about this one because we get to geek out about something that I really, really like. I get to do that like every single time for like I interview anyone or like a panel or anything, but still, I really like. I'm really excited for this one, and I hope you guys are too. Today we have a really cool guest with us. I'm gonna let her introduce herself before I like totally switch her last name with somebody else's or totally mispronounce it or I don't know whatever that is tend to happen. So anyway, I am Dr. Elizabeth Sanchez from Psychology for Geeks, and today we have.
Hi, my name is Shelby Summers, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker in New Jersey.
Yeah, yes. And I would like to call attention to her shirt because it's very, very cool.
I gotta represent. I'm a
Uh,
huge Studio Ghibli fan, and so I always have to find all the merch that I can.
Dude, same. I don't have enough Studio Ghibli merch, sadly. Uh, why? I don't know why. Um,
There's too
yeah,
many
that's
good
a.
things to buy.
Uh, I don't know. I tend to I want little things that I can sort of like I'm looking at like my bookshelf right now and I'm like, okay, half of it is Loki and then Avatar the Last Airbender and then the other half is like in between like anime and like D&D and I'm like, okay, well first I need another one because nothing fits there anymore. But yeah, I know I love watching the movies and like rewatching them and um they're very soothing to
Mhm.
me. A lot, well, not all of them. I have not seen all Studio Ghibli movies. I've seen the cute ones, not the scary sad ones. So when they're not really
Looking
scary,
at
they're
you,
just
Grave of
sad.
the Fireflies.
Yeah, I heard it was sad, and I was like, oh look, let me just rewatch this one all over again, and
My
it's
neighbor
totally like that.
Totoro.
Yeah. um, you know what? I didn't actually like it at first.
My neighbor Totoro.
Yeah, I was like, it's kind of like I was like I really liked House Moving Castle because magic,
Yeah.
and I really like Spirited Away. Those were really good. And then everybody like so a lot of my friends sort of like grew up with My Neighbor Totoro, and I was like, okay, and I was like, I mean, he's cute and looks cuddly or whatever. And then I watched it again, and I was like, no, I get it. I get it. I get it. I'm a fan now. Yeah, okay,
Just
I
had
get
to
it.
hit you at the right time.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, wait. So okay, thank you so much for joining me today to geek out. But before we like continue geeking out, I wanted to know a little bit about your origin story. Like, how did you get started into like the geek culture world?
Well, like most geeks, I was kind of just a D20 was rolled and there I was. So, kind of grew up. I've always loved like video games and things like that. I was an avid reader growing up. My grandfather would play like video games. We'd watch like Gargoyles on Disney and stuff like that. So, like, I've always gone ahead and kind of had a lot of this. And one of the lessons that my grandfather instilled in me that I still hold true to this day is that there is no age limit on being a kid. So he was just one giant kid, and that has always sort of been my inspiration too. And especially going ahead, I know through high school, like most people, it was not the most fun experience in the world. I wasn't bullied or anything like that, but there was a lot of just kind of having to find what everyone else was okay with rather than getting to go ahead and have like my anime or getting to go ahead. And I used to love to watch, it was like, I think called Heroes of Cosplay, where it was on sci-fi for a brief time where they would like actually show the full process of people making like these huge elaborate cosplays for competitions and everything. And like I just always had a vested interest in it. And then I always knew that I wanted to be able to, do the stereotypical therapist thing and help people. And so, when I went ahead and I originally went to school for psychology, and I thought I was going to go get my doctorate in clinical psychology or counseling because I thought that was the only route to go. No one had ever talked to me otherwise. And I remember going ahead, I got waitlisted from one of the programs, and I thought my world was ending. And on a whim, I decided to apply for social work for a master's at Rutgers, and I got in because they didn't require GRE scores. And I was like, great, that is just what I need. And so I went ahead and I ended up in social work, and it has actually been a blessing in disguise. It was right where I needed to be because I am very person centered. I'm very big on kind of within social work, we have this idea of person and environment, right? How our environment sort of shapes us, and that we are not just a clinical diagnosis or anything like that, but we are the relationships around us, the situations we're in. And more recently, I've been pushing that boundary as well to include the media we consume. I have had the absolute pleasure of getting to do some fantastic presentations at bigger conventions as well as to other therapists, kind of talking about, geek culture and using that as part of therapeutic practice. And so in more recent years, I came across like just this little hub of like geek therapy and everything on Facebook. And I was like, oh my God, there are more people like me. And I was so excited to get to see other people geeking out and kind of using these things that are so important to us as part of the therapeutic process, whether it's ways to kind of relate to different characters, or I've even gone ahead and worked with individuals about like finding out what is their ninja way in the way that Naruto does, just to kind of find out what core values are and things like that, or talking about breathing in the style of like Demon Slayer or hum on breathing from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Like it just kind of depends on, what helps individuals relate. And so I've absolutely loved kind of getting to bring in geek culture. And I now have a lot of individuals who seek me out because I am a geek and everything. And like one of my bios, I have the tagline, "It's dangerous to go alone, so don't." And I've had a client call up and be like, "Is that a Zelda reference?" And I'm like, "Yes." Almost like it's like a trick question. Like if I tell
No,
you that it is.
wait a minute. Are you saying that you just started using like geek culture into like your work, like just because, like you
I
loved
mean,
it?
yeah, that was a big part of it, was going ahead and like just
Wow.
using it because I love it.
Because okay, so because I like you were talking about it, I was like, yeah, awesome. And then you said the whole thing. I was like, oh, I was gonna get my PhD in clinical psychology because nobody told me otherwise. And I was like, yeah, nobody told me otherwise. I didn't know master level programs existed. And then like the whole
Mhm.
time, like we were already like in our second, third year of school, and everybody was like, I should have just gotten a master's. And I was like, yeah, but we're in too deep now. Like we owe too much money. Like we have to keep going now. So
Yeah.
that was me. um and the other thing was like, okay, I didn't even know because for me and my part, I didn't really have. I think it's so fantastic that your grandpa was just the one person that was like, you can just be it like childlike like all
Yeah.
your life, like like you can um do that. And like it wasn't until was in grad school that I was just kind of like, oh yeah, I'm a nerd, like to other people, because otherwise I was just like, I like reading, but then I wouldn't say fan fiction. I was just like, books and stuff free online.
Yeah,
I
I
wouldn't say anything.
launch
Yeah.
I have so many clients who they're like, "I read," and then they'll, like, quietly say, like, "fan fiction," and I'll be like, "Fan fiction is still literature, like, come on. If 50 Shades of Grey can do it, anything can do it." Like,
I'm
we
like,
can
well,
100%
there's
have,
just better.
like.
I was like, there's a like really good fan fiction out there. I still
Exactly.
like earlier today I was reading fan fiction.
There are
So
so many good ones.
yeah, they are. And like I'm like, why did you not like how did you are not making this into like, well, okay, yeah, copyrights. That's probably why.
Yeah.
I'm like, but it's so good. And I mean, sometimes because I love reading, especially because again, Loki's like my favorite character. I think everybody knows at this point. And if you didn't know, now you do. But yeah, so I like reading a lot of like Loki fan fiction, and um, a lot of it is sort of like more in depth, more detailed, and like I guess they include more of like the psychological aspect of what
Mhm.
happened, and they sort of like include like how traumatic it was for him to learn about being adopted and all this stuff. So I was like, yeah, this is fantastic. And I'm like, sometimes it's better than the movies.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. Well, I mean, I am totally biased because Yeah, they're all about Loki, and he's my favorite. But still, they are like they're really good writers out there, and I'm like, you do this for fun? Like, you
Yeah.
need to get paid seriously. Um. Anyway, so yeah, look, I mean, I just think it's amazing that you just started sort of like doing it on your own because I kind of, in a way, inherited. Like somebody was like, "Hey, did you know that this is a thing you could do?" And I was like, "What?" I did not, but it became my entire life
Yeah.
after that. So I'm like, oh, this is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, my first job out of grad school and everything, I had ended up in the geek therapy group on Facebook and I had like joined it. And like 2 days later, I saw a practice in the area I was wanting to move to because at the time I lived in Georgia. We was wanting to move to New Jersey because that's where my husband's from. And like he wanted to come
Mhm,
back. And I see a practice that had gone ahead and like they were, in the group, they were big into geek and gaming and going ahead and using like board games and Dungeons and Dragons and everything like that. I see them in there and I get connected and like I end up getting a job there. So like that really helped kind of foster my ability to incorporate so much of this into the practice that I do because I was in a place where we had like the Hylian shield in our office and we had like all kinds of like little crocheted plushies of like Yoshi and stuff like that. For a while we had Audrey too from Little Shop of Horrors, just like
mm,
chilling in our front office and stuff. And so like really being in that space and then especially getting to be in like the geek therapy Facebook community, seeing so many other therapists who do this. I've gotten to go to tags and get to go ahead and present there, which was absolutely wonderful to get to see just more people trying to go ahead and incorporate like geek culture. And then especially here more recently, I've found out that specifically the New Jersey chapter of like the Association for Social Workers has an interest in it. So I got to do a presentation there, just like introducing people to like geek culture and like
mhm,
using it in therapy, especially because for me, one of the things that's been so instrumental is the fact that it in itself is not a modality, right? I don't have to be trained in geek therapy. It's rather a language that can be commonly spoken between me and my clients, and I can use it as a bridge for cognitive behavioral, or I use a lot of like ACT techniques or dialectical behavioral. Like I can use all of those techniques and all of the sort of jargon and things like that that I know, all the technical knowledge, I can now parse to them through a lens of something they're already connecting with, something they're already relating to. And I've found that it's been really instrumental, especially for people who are trying to, come to terms with themselves or practice self-acceptance and everything. It's always so much easier when we relate it through the characters and the stories that they already love.
yes, I agree. I was like, I got nothing to add because, like, yes, what everything that you said, yes, yes, yes. And I'm like, I think that's why I love it so much too, because a lot of people, like, sometimes when I was like in still in school, uh, I would talk to like supervisors, and they'd be like, kind of like, oh, okay, well, I work with kids a lot, so they were like, yeah, okay, you like superheroes, okay, cool, like you can identify, with the clients. And I'm like, no, but it's so much more than that. Like I'm still
Yeah.
doing therapy. It's just I'm talking about, like, Goku and like,
Yeah.
Superman and Batman. Like it's still the same. And that's one of the things too. Like that's usually sort of like the question, because do you also work with kiddos?
So I do. I go ahead. I've worked as young as 6. Now I work with 10 and up. But a lot of my caseload tends to be teens and adults. And especially
Mm,
in kind of being a geek therapist, I have found a lot of adults who seek me out and kind of wanting to get to go ahead and work with me, way more than even just kids. I think that's kind of the low hanging fruit with all of this, is sort of thinking that geek culture and stuff is just for the kids, right? Same with like
mhm,
play therapy. We do Dungeons and Dragons or something like that. That's just for the kids. When in reality, none of us ever grow up. Like it's so much more impactful. There are so many deeper themes, especially like even going back to talking about Studio Ghibli, right? Like watching My Neighbor Totoro as a kid versus watching it as an adult. There are
mm,
so many
mhm,
things that you pick up on that you're just like, oh. And I know that now there's been the huge craze. I'm not sure if you're, if you've been able to stay away from like Bluey, right? Like Bluey has become this humongous thing that both children and adults are both enjoying and kind of being able to foster conversations as far as emotion regulation and things like that, just because it can really bridge that. And I've seen, a whole bunch of therapists wanting to use that even for adults, like adults who are like, this is my comfort show and I don't care if it's a children's show.
So primarily, like, one of the things that I've always wanted to do was do this. I connect with other mental health providers that also use geek culture in their work, in their practice. And I've reached out to a lot of people, and we're all super passionate about it, and we're like, yes, I will talk about it, like, I'll do panels, I will do this with you. And I'm like, yay. So that was exciting, because at first it was very like, if they say no, like, they don't even know me, I'm still a student, like, what do I even know,
Yeah.
there's a lot of that surrounding that. And then after that, everybody was like, yeah, I would love to do that. And I was like, haha, let me just do more of this, more of all of it. And so I kind of, yeah, got obsessed with it. But one of the things too that sometimes I'm like, I live and work in an area where geek culture is not really something that's very big. Is still relatively small. Mental health even less. Like, it's a very sort of like rural place, and somehow stuck back, in the early 2000s about a lot of things. So I'm like, trying to connect with the community, and build, sort of like resources, and try to build a community to do this. And I've had to sort of like default back to just talking about mental health in general, not about geeky things, because people don't uh come out for those quite yet. So I'm like, okay, baby steps, baby steps. Eventually we'll get there, and then we will have a convention.
Yeah.
And that will be so awesome.
We
But
just slowly have to ingratiate them with it.
yeah. And now I totally forgot what
Start
my
leaving
point
out
was.
like D20 like dice and stuff like that.
I should. Oh, you know how sometimes you're like, oh, $100 bill, and you open it, it's like an ad for something. I should do that. Like, leave like a Pokemon card, or like a Magic the Gathering cards
Yeah.
everywhere, and then just be like, oh, it's a business
Actually
card,
have
and
it
I'm
be
like, oh,
your business
wait, what?
card. Just actually have it be your business card.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be awesome. Actually, yeah, that's a good idea. I'm like, maybe she'll write it down or something. Yeah, but I'm trying to do that. So I'm getting sort of like in contact with, geeky stores and stuff like that. No, wait, but I had a really good question, and now I forgot it. Jeez. Because then I got distracted by all the cool things you were saying. Um, yeah, I had supervisors before when I was training that just didn't really understand what I was trying to do, primarily because I work with kids, right? Well, I guess they didn't understand, but they didn't really care, because I work with kids, and with
Mhm.
kids it's a lot of like play therapy or whatever,
Yeah.
um but even with adults, I will be like, hey, let's color. And I'm like, what? And I'm like, yeah, coloring, it's fun. And then they were like, okay, I guess. And then they will start coloring. And then because I used to work at this psychiatric hospital, and we would play like music, and then we kind of have like an hour, like just kind of like mindfulness, just coloring, chatting. And then people like started relaxing, and they started talking about their stuff, and it was just so much better, right? And it made things a lot easier. And I'm like, yeah, as adults you can also color,
Yeah.
but there's this sort of like, again, like you said, kind of like a stigma, like we're like, like people
Yeah.
don't, adults don't do that, or we have no time for fun, or what are you, still a child?
Yeah.
And my sort of like,
I've
yeah,
definitely seen a lot of that. Like I've gotten out like Play-Doh and Legos for some of my adults where like they want to go ahead and talk about like huge, big, like traumatic experiences. And it's like you just need something to do with your hands. Like I've played Uno as we were going ahead and talking about things because like sometimes our brain just needs that distraction. And so a lot of what I do is just kind of normalizing it. And I'm a really big proponent of sort of meeting my clients where they are. So even from like the get-go with me, I'm really big on being able to talk about how this is their time, that ultimately I will still hold them accountable. But like if you need something as simple as like staring at the wall instead of staring at me, I do not care. Like I can turn my chair around, I can face another direction. We're not going to play this whole game of like eye contact, right? Like I work with a lot of individuals who are, on spectrum or ADHD, and like there's that pressure of like I have to be going ahead and like making eye contact with you, and I go ahead and I'm like, hey, if that's gonna be a distraction, I don't care. Like, you will not hurt my feelings. It is totally fine to do what is comfortable for you. And I've had it to where, even some of my teens, I go and I'm like, hey, I've got some coloring, and it's just sitting there. And they're like, okay. And then they start to color. And then the next time they come in, it's like, oh, where's the crayons? Like, you don't have anything? And it's like, I'll be right back.
I had a client earlier this week talk about he was playing too much video games, and I was like, what? And I was like, sorry, you're like, you came to the wrong person for advice on that. Like, I was like, I would never say stop playing. And I'm like, set boundaries for yourself, figure out how you can limit the time. Yes.
Yeah.
But and I'm like, because I was like, oh, I could be more productive. And I was like, playing video games is being productive because you're doing self-care. Like, you're
Mhm.
doing something fun. Like, it doesn't always have to be adult grown-up stuff. Like, you can just have a whole weekend where you do nothing but play video games, and
Yeah.
eat junk food. As long as you kind of like remember to go back,
Mhm.
to real life and stuff. But yeah. Oh, wait, one of the things that I wanted to say was sort of like um advertising
Mhm.
for your practice. Is that something you do, or is
So
that something?
I do have my own Psychology Today page. So I have that, and I completely wrote it out and everything. And I had gone ahead and I had worked really, like, I agonized over what I was going to put on my Psychology Today page, because I really wanted it to be a moment where individuals can first get a little bit of my personality. Especially because I know when I was going through my master's program, there is so much emphasis on disclosure and like making sure that you don't disclose to clients, you don't do this, you don't do that. And it was so much pressure. And when I got into all of it, especially working with my clients, like I still 100% have boundaries and I'm always intentional with my disclosure, but there is a level that you have to have, especially within like a geek culture and especially with so many of the populations I work with. And so I wanted it to be an invitation for them to see a little bit of who I am, right? Because I'm really big on the fact that ultimately it doesn't matter how great a therapist is with their modalities that they use, therapy comes down to relationship. Right? If you do not have rapport with your therapist, if you do not have that connection, it doesn't matter how great you are at using the modalities you use, challenging anything is going to break down. Communication is going to break down. And so when I wrote it, I talked about like the first lines are, it's dangerous to go alone, so don't. And talking about how therapy is hard and, finding a therapist is hard enough. So trying to go ahead and find ways to let them know what my approach is, but also having it be something that's personal. I didn't want to go ahead and have, a lot of the jargon you see of just, I'm going to create a safe space that's warm and inviting and like all of the super like therapist stuff that they do. I wanted
And
to kind
listing
of
every
sprinkle.
single DSM disorder as something that you're. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I really wanted to go ahead. I pride myself on talking about being LGBTQ and neurodivergent affirming. And so even when I work with individuals, I let them know what that means, that I'm not just going ahead and wanting to throw that tag on there because who wants to be the therapist that says that they're not, but rather going
Mhm.
ahead and being able to demonstrate to them that my ideas of neurodiverse affirming is finding what works for you rather than fitting into a box. I'm not going to sit here and problem solve with you and find something to do that gets you to be more neurotypical, because you're not. Your brain processes it differently, and that's beautiful and okay. Like ultimately finding where are the strengths, how do we play with it, and so getting to create that space. So I've gone ahead both in my Psychology Today page, and then our practice also has a website where you have photos of all of us, and we have little bios there too. So both of those have my little geeky nods, and then I have my profile picture itself is me wearing a Calcifer shirt with like Totoro behind me. So like it at least goes ahead and like gives a little image of like what you can expect.
Listen. I feel like I'm about to cry right now. Because like every time you're like, oh my god, I feel like so like validated, like everything you're saying, and I was like, exactly, that's what I'm trying to tell people. Like this is exactly what I'm talking about. But you know what made me really sad the other day? I follow a bunch of like mental health providers because I like do a lot of collabs and stuff, and then I logged into my Facebook, and then someone was like, hey, if you're like seeking for therapy or whatever, make sure you ask them about what your divergent like affirming is to them, because sometimes they're really not. And I was like,
Yeah.
excuse me. And then I started
Yeah.
thinking about it. I was like, oh my gosh, like it is possible, because it is a sort of not necessarily like a trendy thing, but there is sort of like, oh, I'm like, what is the thing, like in like school they always tells you you have to be like culturally sensitive and
Yeah.
have all these things, and I'm like, but in reality a lot of therapists, unless they are like from, even then sometimes it doesn't happen, but like unless they're from that culture, or like they themselves are like neurodivergent in some way, it just it's difficult for them sometimes to connect.
Yeah.
There is sort of like, oh, this standard, like you were saying, like, oh, there's this, like, don't reveal anything about yourself, don't do this, don't do that. And like just from the get-go, I remember sitting in class and being like, I don't like that, I don't like that
Yeah.
either, like it just feels really unnatural to me. And then the more I started working in the field, the more I was like, I've always been sort of like, I want to be a good person, I want to be like, so I'm
Gotta
like,
follow the
I'm
rules.
gonna grow. I just want to listen, what they tell me or whatever. But then I was like, I, I can't. Like this is so weird. It was unnatural for me to like not have any sort of like emotions, be a blank or whatever. Um, it was unnatural to like not make small talk. It was unnatural for me to like not joke or like talk a little bit about myself, because that's what works. Like you were saying, like the therapeutic relationship is the most important thing. And sometimes me going, so anyway, my ADHD the other day, like I was just, and then people are like, oh, oh, it's so nice to talk to someone who's also ADHD, because we get tips and tricks. And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, I talk to every single like client out there, and I'm like, listen, it doesn't matter if and I'm like, because I tell them, okay, for me the most important thing is that they feel comfortable with me in therapy. If they're not comfortable with me, and I'm like, let me know, and I'll like give you a referral to someone else, because I don't want to keep you here if you feel uncomfortable. It's not going to be good for the both of us,
Yeah,
So,
that's
yeah.
always something I do in my intro too. Like that is part of my beginning spiel is that I go ahead and I'm like, "Hey, I want you to go ahead and know that if at any
Mhm,
point you feel this isn't working, let me know. You will not hurt my feelings. I will
mhm,
not get upset because I know that for so many individuals that I hear these horror stories of like therapists they've been with before. And I know for me, part of being culturally sensitive for myself is knowing when I'm not a part of that culture, right? Like, I know that for me, I am a cisgendered, heterosexual, white female. I know that about myself. I am very aware, which means that while I very much want to help people and I work with people in all different walks of life and populations, I also know that at a certain point, they may not feel like I'm the best for them. I, work with people of color and they may not feel like I am the best. That is perfectly fine. And I think a lot of what gets in the way for some therapists when they're trying to be culturally sensitive is our own egos, right? Like ultimately, if a client comes to me and says, "Hey, I just don't think you're a right fit for me," that does not shatter my whole world. That does not have me sit here and have all of the imposter thoughts of like, "Oh God, if should I be doing this?" Like
mhm.
ultimately, this is their journey, not mine. I'm just the tour guide. I point at stuff and ask what it is. Like,
No, essentially. And I'm like, a lot of the times in therapy, sometimes I'm like, wait, what am I even doing here? Because a lot of the times it's just being like, me is like, yeah, that sucks, man. Like,
yeah,
that person was mean. You deserve better. Did you remember to do self-care? And like the other day, I was kind of like, I don't know. I've been really sensitive because I've been finding a lot of things that about the field that I don't like. And so I was talking to someone and I said, hey, it really sucks that you have to basically like tone yourself down in order to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And then they were like, oh, thanks. And I was like, yeah, so let's figure out how you can go around whatever issue without having to do that, right? And like having your needs met. And then they were like, oh, okay. And I was like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, I was like, listen, not only is it important that they feel comfortable with us, but it's also very important that whatever I do, because I was like, sometimes I feel like I'm just repeating myself all the time. Like almost every client, and I'm like, listen, I can tell you how to solve this problem and be like, all right, step 1, step 2, and 3, right? And this is what you can do. These are like the different options that are available to you that you can try, right? And I'm like, and then you're gonna go home and be like, yeah, that sucks. I don't like any of those, right? And I'm like, no, what we have to figure out is what fits for you in terms of
Mhm.
personality, in terms of like your lifestyle, right? Because if I say, hey, you need to exercise for an hour like 3 times a week, and you're like mega busy, you're gonna be like, hey, this person's crazy, bye, never seen you again. And I'm like, no, no,
Yeah.
we need to like figure out what works for you, because it needs to, this is something that needs to become routine for
Mhm.
you, right? And the easiest way, I'm like, just go to hobbies, whatever hobby you is, go do it more often. Gardening, cooking, um somebody was like clay making or playing the, oh, what
Oh.
is it, oh, what's that cool instrument, um saxophone.
Ah.
I was like, oh, that's so cool. um like, I was like, yeah, do that. And I'm like, those are none of like my hobbies at all.
Yeah.
But I'm like, but I understand, like it makes you feel good. And then I was talking about like mindfulness, and I was like, and then I said something about mindfulness, and they were like, oh, I tried it before, and it's just not for me. And I'm like, no, listen, there's ways to go about it. Like,
Mhm.
mindfulness doesn't have to be just sit there, close your eyes, and take deep breaths. And I was like, there's a lot of different ways to do it. And I'm like, I like coloring. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that's kind of like what gives me a sense of like, being present in the moment, not judging myself, you know kind of like relaxing, and like it just, your breathing sort of like goes with it. And I'm like, and I said something about, I just said coloring, and they were like, that's the feeling I get when I'm exercising. I'm like, oh dude, you're practicing mindfulness right there, like, like you're doing that. um
Yeah.
yeah, that's why I love that. But it just,
Yeah,
it's
I
not.
know for mindfulness, I've even told people, like, aside from just like the whole like deep breathing and stuff, I was like, hey, if you're doing dishes, walk through what's happening. Imagine Morgan Freeman is narrating what you're doing right now. Like, you have him just going ahead, and or Neil deGrasse Tyson, like just in your head telling you like what you're doing and all of that. Because I know for me, when I'm working with individuals, and especially like even as far as like geek culture goes, when I'm looking at how I incorporate it into the practice that I do, a big part of it is intentionality, right? Being able to
Mhm,
know that if we're going ahead and we're having to have different versions of ourselves, that we're intentional about it. Because it makes total sense that at work, I have to have a different version than my at home, right? Being
mhm,
able to know, like, how are we intentional with it rather than it going ahead and being that reactionary thing. And then the other side of it too is working with them to be able to, normalize their experience without minimizing it, right? Being able to go ahead that even as I sit here and I tell my clients that we can do X, Y, and Z, I always go ahead and I, end that statement with, but it's not going to be easy. Like, this sounds easy. We can talk about it all day long like it's easy, but this is going to suck. Like, straight out, because there are so many times where, especially in our field and everything, there's this idea of like toxic positivity, right? Of just like, be okay, you're fine, like it'll be fine. And a lot of times, what I have to work with individuals on is that even as they're telling themselves, like, it's fine, you're okay, like it comes from a fantastic place, but it still goes ahead and minimizes that emotion. Because if you tell yourself you're fine and physically you're not fine, we are now going ahead and having that juxtaposition of emotions, right? So being able to go ahead and acknowledge the, hey, I'm not okay right now, but I will be, right? Being able to have those sort of things. And so really being able to even look at some of that as far as like mindfulness goes, right? I talk with them a lot about when we're trying to change automatic thoughts, that like the automatic thought will still happen. That is fine. You are not failing because you have that automatic thought of like telling yourself like, I'm so stupid. Why did I do that? Right?
mhm,
It's not like we're going ahead and saying like, no, you can't say that you're stupid ever again. What we're saying is that you have that thought and then you wait, that was stupid, right? What I did was stupid. I'm huge on language and what we go ahead and use and how we talk about things. And even just those subtle little changes from I'm so stupid to that was stupid, right? Being able to have that difference between me as a being, something that feels more fixed and more rigid, to feeling or doing where that can be more fluid. And so, like, even just teaching individuals that, like, that is still being mindful too. Like, that is still going ahead and using those same techniques.
So I think we're just gonna have to cut this interview short because I am gonna start crying. I was like, everything you say, I'm like, how are you getting everything from my head? Like, I feel like you're just reading my mind.
It's fine.
And
We'll
I'm
just talk
like,
about slime instead.
no, I mean, this is fantastic because yes, exactly. That's kind of like, what you want to hear in therapy. And I think sometimes I say things like, oh, my therapist said the other day, and then they were like, oh, you have a therapist? And I'm like, yeah, like I'm human. Like I also need someone to talk to. Like, just because I know things up here doesn't mean like I actually like do things, or it gets down to like the feelings and stuff. And I'm like, yeah,
Spoiler alert,
sometimes
it's
that happens.
harder as a therapist. We're painfully aware of what's going
What we're
on and
doing,
still
yeah.
can't do it.
Yeah. And then the whole thing about just when you said, oh, this is going to be hard. And I'm like, I say that all the time. I go on like this big spiel about how, you know what? I'm being like so supportive and being like, yeah, you could do this or whatever. But it's going to be hard because, you've been doing this for like a bunch of years and
Yeah.
it's hard to change. So, it's going to be something that, you have to give yourself sort of like that. You have to allow yourself to like make those mistakes. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to change from one day to another. So I'm like, you just have to let you sort of like make those mistakes. Every time you forget to do something, it's okay, maybe next time you remember, right? Or like do it when you remember it. And wait, what's the other thing I wanted to say? I forgot. I remember. Anyway, wait, hold on, because wow, having such a great conversation. I love this. But I want to know more about sort of like your personally like top fandoms that you're interested in.
So vastly like vary so much. First and foremost, I have to say Persona 5 is like near and dear to my heart. I absolutely love Persona 5. It was my first Persona game. I had begged my husband to please play it for me because I had never played a Persona game. I had heard about 3 being incredibly hard, and I was like, I'm gonna rage quit and like break our TV, so I can't play this. And he had gone ahead and he had soft locked himself playing Persona 3, so he refused. And I was like, but please, I want the story. And it was before like the animation came out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I picked it up from like GameStop for like $30 pre-owned. And I was like, fine, worst case scenario, they have like a return policy and I'll get my money back.
Mm-hmm.
And I fell in love, so much to the point that I fell in love. My husband fell in love. My best friend who lived with us at the time fell in love, so that I ended up having to buy a second PlayStation and a second copy of Persona. So that is definitely like top, like one of my top fandoms. I absolutely adore it. I am a huge Studio Ghibli fan. I love Howl's Moving Castle. That is my absolute favorite. Howl is like, my husband knows I love him, but like Howl also, like Howl
Wait,
exists in my
wait,
world.
wait a second.
Have a what?
Have you read the books? That
I have not. I just bought all of them, and so like I'm so excited to get to read them. I've heard that it's very different in the books than it is the
it,
movie.
it is. So I had a whole conversation. My brother has not read it, but I'm like, here, I need to talk to someone, and you're the closest person, so sit there and listen to me. But like, I didn't even know they were based on a book. And then one of my friends like, how did you not know if you're a fan? I was like, I don't know. I just watched the
Look,
movies.
we don't get it here.
Yeah, and then I read the books, and I think they're supposed to be like preteen, like early teenage years, sort of like book. And it's actually really good.
Yeah.
uh I like Sophie in
Mhm.
um in the movie, but in the books she's so much better. Like she's so cool.
Yeah.
And also like I just love like her and like Hal together
Yeah.
as sort of like as a team, because there's this acceptance of her, of who he is, and she's like, yeah, he's been his dramatic self again, whatever, come on, let's go, like you don't have to do that. And then I'm like,
Yeah.
she never gets mad at him for doing that. She's just kind of like, all right, calm
This
down, let's
again?
go.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I'm like, yeah, like it's just more hilarious, I guess, in like the books. They made him be like super cool and sexy and mysterious, like in the movie and stuff.
I mean, it
And,
was voiced by Christian Bale, so like how is it not?
yeah, and I was like, yeah. But I like both versions, and then we're talking about how like that's sort of like the beauty of it, because essentially I feel like Hayao Miyazaki read the book and he was like, I like it, but I'm gonna make fan fiction of it. And like he just made the movie, and I'm like, it's great, and I'm like, see, this is why it's so cool. Like this is why it's like it should be allowed
Yeah.
to like copyright whatever. Like, okay, listen, all these companies, they're getting like a bunch of free like marketing and stuff when,
Mhm,
when it comes to like fan fiction, fan
mhm.
art. So whenever they're like, oh, we're not like, there's been a couple of like dramatic moments where some companies are like, you can't use our products to do any sort of content, and everyone's like, are you kidding me, this is my whole livelihood, kind of
Yeah,
thing. And then I'm like, but why would you even do that? Like, they're getting people to play this game, right?
yeah.
I recently really got into like watching VTubers thanks to my brother, and now I'm like, I'm a phone gamer. I like my friend
Are
was
you playing like oh what is it? Like there's Genshin Impact and Hakon Star Rail and all of those.
like, that's too complex for me, dude. Like, no, I'm talking about like super like cozy, like things that you do
Oh,
over and over again. Like,
okay.
because video games for me are kind of like I just want to turn my mind off and I
Mhm.
just do something cool and like watch this animation over and over again, right? I don't want to think. And my brother's like, that's boring. And I'm like, well, I don't want to think about like what sword is better or what potion I need to go do or whatever, right? So I was like, those video games that he usually plays or whatever, or like even the VTubers that I watch, I'm like, they're too complex for me. And then I started
Yeah.
watching them play this game, and then I was like, that was cool. And then they were like, I have a love-hate relationship with Minecraft. Sorry, everyone,
Mm,
but it's because you know how it kind of looks pixelated, like everything's
yeah.
pixelated. I visually, that kind of like
Mhm.
zones me out a little bit, and I'm like, it's kind of hard for me to see and tell what's going on. But then I see like how many cool things you can do on it, and then I'm like, oh, maybe I should play it. Maybe just a little bit. And then like the other day, my brother, I was inviting him to like hang out with me or something, and watch some like a streamer that I was watching, and we both like. And then he was like, "Nah, I'm gonna go play video games." And I was like, "Oh, cool. What are you gonna play?" He's like, "Minecraft." And I was like, "How dare you?" I was like, "I was supposed to play it first." And then because he was like, "I don't want Minecraft or whatever," and then he was like, "Yeah, I stopped playing it a long time ago or whatever." And now we're like just fighting about like how he's just stealing other things that I want to do, because like I'm so busy doing a lot of things for like this or like
Yeah.
actually working and whatnot. And I'm like, yeah, I don't have time to play video games. So like that's why I like my phone games, because those are things that I
Mhm.
can do for like 5-10 minutes, like in between sessions or whatever. And then I won't be like, oh no, that's half of the story, because I get so addicted. Like
Yeah.
I can't read books at night. I can't start like books when I know, or like a series or show that I know I'm
Yeah.
gonna love, because then I'm gonna be like thinking about it the whole time. So I can't do any
Yeah.
that in between sessions. But like those little like tiny games where you just merge things and it becomes like a level up from that, or like something bigger, like
Yeah.
I that, because there's no storyline to that. There's nothing to it.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, story though, like
Like there are like so many great ones on like Switch and everything. Cause like I play on my Switch. I love the cozy games. There's one that I fell in love with that was called Cozy Grove, where it's very much like Animal Crossing.
mm-hmm.
Like you have like all your like they're little bear spirits, but essentially they're all spirits, and you are a spirit counselor who's going around. It's like almost like a camp style, and so like you're earning your merit badges, going ahead and helping these ghosts get the things they need so that they can cross over and stuff like that. But it's designed to only have like 30 minutes to an hour's worth of gameplay every day, because it's a daily sort of like game in the
Oh, I
sense
see.
of going ahead and like very similar to Animal Crossing, where like your resources come back every day and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. And there'll be little things to do. They all give you like little quests each day that they want you to go and do and everything. And that's how you like level up with them. So like it gets that story, you get those pieces about them. The bears have like relationships to each other. So like you learn more about them. But like it's just so cozy and easy. I know during COVID, like Spiritfarer was a huge game for me that like got me through so much, where you're essentially a character who is taken over for Chiron, the one who goes out and crosses over everybody in like Greek mythology.
Oh yeah,
You've
yeah.
taken over for him. So now you're going around finding the lost souls, helping them deal with whatever they need to be able to move on. Then you take them for them to be able to move on. But along the way, you're also learning the story of like how you died and why you're here and like
Mm-hmm.
that sort of stuff. But it's one where like you're going ahead, you're building out the boat and everything, because everyone gets their houses on your boat. You can farm
Mm-hmm.
on your boat, you can fish off your boat. So like even as you're traveling around the map, you can just fish. Like super cozy. There's like no bosses or anything like
Mm-hmm.
that. You'll have like a few things that are like sort of like mini games. So like they might be like timed or stuff like that, but there's no stakes. Like nothing bad happens. It's just, do you collect a bunch of it or do you not? And so I absolutely love those. I'm a huge like cozy gamer. Like I play some of the other stuff. Like I'm on my third Baldur's Gate playthrough right now because I just keep going through Baldur's Gate.
I heard so much like about it. Like people love it so much. And I think like every time I come across like a new game that someone's playing, I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And then they just kind of like have their own twist to it on how they're playing it, why they're playing it and stuff like that. And I love hearing those stories. I love stories in general.
Yeah, I love hearing how my clients get connected to things. I love going ahead. I had one today who'd gone ahead and like asked me if I knew what isekais were, and I'm like, oh, oh my goodness! Like, I watched that time I got reincarnated as
Hold
a
my soda.
slime. I watched Konosuba. Like, I'm huge anime fan and everything, and so it's one where I love not only when they get to go ahead and mention something they love, but especially when I recognize it and you just see that like spark in them as they're like, oh my god, like you know the thing that I'm talking about. And like even if I have cursory knowledge of it, there's just that level of they're like, oh my god, like this is okay, like you're cool with this.
There's the whole thing, like I love that when you're like, oh, I love it too, and then you're like, you love it too, and then we just start talking over each other. Oh, so cool. Yeah, you like this thing? Yeah, me too. And then it's so cool. And like, one of the reasons why I love going to Comic Cons, because I'm like really shy. I don't really talk to people, but like when I go, but I like just sort of like being there surrounded by a lot of like geeky people that love the same things that I do. And then I see someone in cosplay and I'm like, most of the time it's a low-key cosplay, I admit, but then I'm like, I love your shirt, and they're like, oh yeah, thank you. And I was like, oh, it's so cool. I love
I'm
it.
always like supporting people, like even the like low budget like cosplays. I will like go up and be like, oh my god, I love you, like this is the best ever and everything. I love people watching. It is like one of my favorite things to do at cons, just to see what everybody does, to see like how like small I've seen for something. Like there can be something that I've watched that I'm like, oh, there's no chance this is going to have someone cosplay it, and then there is, and I'm just like, oh my god, you watched that like small niche thing that I watched too. Like I think at this last one I went to Level Up Expo in Las Vegas, and I'd happened to see a single booth that had merch for an older anime called Kitakio Hitman Reborn. And I have like never seen Reborn merch anywhere, and I like freaked out. I was like grabbing my husband. I was like, oh my god, like they have Reborn stuff, because like it's not one of the mainstream animes. It was like in like the 2010s, and like there have been so many rumors. I think like now a bunch of like voice actors of like who were fans of it have gone ahead and essentially done like a fan dub of it. So like they're doing like I think 3 episodes, and I as soon as my husband told me about it, I'm like, dude, we have to buy this just so we can let them know there's interest.
Yes,
Like we have to make this happen.
Yeah. Wait. Okay. You said isekais, and I was like, I gotta talk to someone about this. Okay. First, I have a couple.
I haven't watched today's episode. I will preface that.
Which one?
For Slime. I know a new episode came out today.
I haven't seen the new seasons.
Oh, okay,
You're
cool.
safe with
We're
me.
good.
You're
No
safe.
spoilers.
Yeah. No spoilers. Wait, but have you seen? Well, I don't know if this one's a complete isekai kind of a thing. Solo Leveling. Have you seen that one yet?
I have. I love Solo Leveling. That one is so cool. I'm loving all of the things that are crossing over from like webtoons and stuff like that, and like becoming like bigger. I know I've also watched like Jujutsu Kaisen. I am a huge fan of Jujutsu Kaisen. I love it. Megami is my favorite. But yeah, Solo Leveling was so good.
It's just like, okay, listen, I did a because I binged it, of course I did. And then I was like, it's for content, I need it for content. It's for work. It's not for me, guys. I do for you.
Yeah.
I do to promote mental health.
You think I enjoyed this?
No.
You think I enjoy watching this?
I do not. Anyway, so I watched it, and then I was like, oh my gosh, I love it. And I was like, I don't even know why I started watching it, because I was like, I have heard of it because I was on Webtoon reading, which I am not caught up. I was reading Lore Olympus. That's how I got into like Webtoon, and I was like, wait, isekais. And then I was like, ooh, all the isekais, like read them all, like all the completed ones, because I cannot wait for like, or like the ones that have at least 2 seasons, because then at
Yeah.
least that's like half of the plot, and then that scratches the itch of like my brain, you know. And then I'm like, next one, next one, next one. And I've like so many ones that I come across that sometimes I go to my brother and I'm like, listen, I gotta tell you about this one. And usually we're like, yeah, like we don't really like what the other one likes, because he's, you know, he likes different things. And then sometimes I would tell him one and he said like, what's it called again? And he starts Googling. I was like, okay, this is the one I need to read. And I was like, yes, you should read it. Um uh yeah, but anyway, so I don't even know why I started watching it. I think it was for content. I was like, I just check it out to see if it's good or whatever. And then I was like, oh, it's so cool. And then I was looking for images and stuff, and I was like, wait a minute, maybe I need to go back and read the webtoons, because like, dude, the drawings were so
They're
cool. And I was
so
like,
good.
I need to read this. So yeah, that's definitely on my and also I get to finish the story without having to wait for the next season. Yes. Um wait, but yeah, so that's a cool one that I really did like. The other one that when we met for the first time, I was like, well, I don't know what you said, and I was like, yes, we need to talk about this, and let's not forget. Like earlier today, I was like, let's talk about this, and it's how I reincarnated as a slime,
Mhm.
or something like that.
Yeah, that
I
time I got reincarnated
really,
as a slime.
yeah, there you go. I love it so much. I watched it twice with my brother, because it okay, the whole time uh we were like watching like the first season. I think when I first watched it, there was only 2 seasons available. Not like the extra stories and stuff, like those weren't available yet.
Yeah.
And then I was like, "Oh, this is so cool," because it just makes me feel like it restores my hope in humanity, and like there's people out there who are good, who are working to make it better, and and I'm like, kindness and being nice to people, and like that all works. And like, just because he was so like good, he was able to like gain so much power just because he was trying to help people. And I was
Yeah.
like, yes, exactly, that's how he should be, like in the real life. And I love it so much. Anyway,
Yeah,
I
I
wanted to
mean,
hear your side.
yeah, like I love the idea that Rimuru is just a genuine, like, just wants to be good, wants to go ahead and essentially just like live a chill life. And I love the idea of Rimuru going about the world not realizing how powerful he is. Like going ahead and doing things as simple as in the world he names a whole bunch of creatures, they all get a whole bunch of strength. And like naming is supposed to be a giant thing. Like monsters do not have names, and yet Rimuru is just handling them out like it's free comic book day. Like Rimuru is just giving
I love how
names.
he's so like, I ran out of names, so I'm just gonna give you the same name that I gave someone else.
And so like just this idea of like having so much hidden power and having the duality of Rimuru being a peaceful, like loving person, but also as you get further in, like Rimuru is realizing that he has to be forceful sometimes. Like he has to go ahead and set boundaries and things like that. I know that one of my favorite things, like not spoilery, so I'm going to talk about it very much because it is from this recent season, but there's a moment where they're kind of strategizing and game planning about like battle and stuff like that, and he's trying to like avoid any casualties on like the enemy side. But he has a line where he's just like, hey, if at any point it seems like your lives are in danger, throw the plan out and protect yourselves. Like none of you die. They can go, like, I know our goal is to keep them alive, but if any of you are at risk, throw that plan out because your lives matter more to me. And I'm just like, I love this. Like just going ahead and having that support and like those positive relationships.
Yes, and like, the one thing that I really do enjoy about it is that, like, it's so okay. Maybe it just connects because if I was like isekai, I feel like that's what I would like to do. But then, like, in other isekais, either you have to like be reborn in like someone's body in order to like be able to do a bunch of things, um or like you have to be like really knowledgeable about how to like make soap or books or like medicine or something. And I'm like, I have no idea how to cook. I don't know how to do anything. And I was like,
I'm
I
out
would
here
love
gonna
it.
live Konosuba life. Like I'm gonna have like a goddess who's like the most useless goddess with me or something. Have like no skills. Have you watched Konosuba?
have not yet.
So that is a really fun one. I recommend it. It's a little raunchy at times, but in
Mhm,
like a very playful way. But it's essentially he gets reincarnated in another world and he wants to go ahead and be like a huge adventurer.
mhm.
And he ends up taking the goddess who is supposed to grant him an ability. He decides that you will be my gift. Like I get one gift when I go into the new world. You will be my gift. So he brings the goddess to the world with him and she's useless. Like she can do some water tricks, like some like make like a water fountain. Like she is not a powerful goddess. And like all of his team, like he's got a sorceress who's with him who will do one single spell. She will just do explosion magic, and when she does that explosion magic, she is out for the rest of the day. Like that is one thing she can do. So it's just like this whole hodgepodge of like characters who are just useless trying to like fumble their way through. Like they have to make money, they have to go on quests, and like he is just constantly like how what are we doing? And so it is 100% so much fun. It is now doing I think a second season, and it had a spin-off series too and a movie, so I highly
Okay.
recommend
I will have lots to watch then. Yeah.
it.
So like, one of the things that I always found annoying, especially like because I love romantic comedies, and like in romantic comedies, there's always the I'll take care of you. You don't have to worry about it, or they're born into like royalty or whatever. Or they're just really funny, and that's why they like the main character falls in love with her or whatever. But there's always the like, I would die for you, and I'm like, are you trying to leave me alone here like with this thing? And I was like, what are you trying to do? No, 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 no. You keep yourself alive, right? And like
Yeah,
again, that's why I love like, I love my little slime so much because
yeah.
yeah. And then he's always
You
I don't know, like he's go ahead.
I was gonna say, have you watched Toradora?
Yes.
That is such a good rom-com that like is actually genuine. Like I was watching Fruits Basket because like I watched Fruits Basket when it was like first airing on like,
Oh,
Hulu and everything, and you had like the
mhm,
horrible like dub and all of that. So I was first watching that, and so when they announced the newer version, I was like, okay, I have to. Like I'm
mhm.
obligated to. Like I fell in love with Yuki when I was, a teenager. Like I have a type. And so I'm watching Fruits Basket, and my husband gets roped into watching it with me, and he's like, "You need to watch Toradora. Toradora does all of this so much better. Like you just need to watch Toradora." So I go through that instead.
No, my my brother gets so mad at me because then sometimes I'm like, I have nothing to watch. I want to watch something, and he'd be like, watch this, and I'm like, no, I don't want to watch that. That doesn't sound interesting to me right now. Because he was like, watch Psycho 100. I was like,
Mm,
nah, that sounds weird. I don't want to watch that. And then he was like, watch what was the other one? Death Note. And I was like,
mm,
no, I don't watch that. And then so he would like recommend all these shows to me. And I was like, oh, they're not like my thing. And then I was like, fine, I guess I'll watch it. And then I love them. And then I was like, dude, it's so good. And I was like, don't even talk to me anymore. He said, like, I keep recommending shows, and you're like, no, I don't want to watch them. And then I recommend them because I know you love them. And so he was the one that recommended Toradora. And I was like, I'm not gonna like it or whatever. And then I watched it and I was like, I loved it. It's so cute.
mm.
So yeah. Um I should probably be asking you questions, but I have no questions. Um
Sorry, everyone. This is just what the interview.
you're
We
just
had
watching
deep,
us geek out.
meaningful conversation, and now it's just like gonna devolve into like anime and like games and stuff.
One of the things that I kind of find difficult sometimes is that when I'm trying to reach out to because I have a bunch of panels that like I've planned, and then I'm like I need more people because I'm like I could use my the people that I know already, and I'm like but I already done panels with them, and then I'm like I want other people to do panels too. And one of the thing I realized is that I mean we're already so busy with like just in general like working and also like keeping up to date with the latest things, like researching and learning more about our practice. And if you have your own practice, there's a whole ton more that that comes with it, so you're extra busy. And if you have a life, you don't have no time, any time to be marketing or doing any other things
Yeah,
outside of it. But then I'm like, but people need to know. People need
I
to know that
know.
there's a really cool therapist out there. And then
Yeah,
so
like
that's why like that's part of the reason why I've been wanting to do this because I'm like one, I want to make sure that people are like, oh, see, this is a thing that can happen, and
Mhm,
you able to like, not only is it possible for you to do that, but they'll be successful at it.
mhm,
Yeah, so you're actually, I believe, the first person that I've interviewed for Geek Private Practice that you are part of a group practice, right? Can you
mhm.
tell us a little bit more about what a group practice is? Because I have no
Yeah.
idea.
So this is actually the third group practice I have been in. So I transitioned into private practice while I was still in my master's program. I was fortunate enough to get an internship. So I've kind of always been in the group practice setting. And so
Mhm,
what that essentially means is that we are a practice of multiple clinicians. So we go ahead, we have, the practice does like all the billing and like all the advertising and things like that. I have kind of taken on some different roles over time. In my role presently, I am just a clinician, so I go
mhm,
ahead, I just see my clients, and that is all that I do. Previously, at the practice I was before, I also did like our community outreach. So I was really big on trying to go ahead and connect with local resources, local agencies, things like that, because it really does just kind of vary. I know that as far as group practices go, you can kind of have more of just everyone's kind of sharing a space. So, like where I am now, we all come, we all go, we do like one team meeting a month and everything just to kind of touch base and still kind of know what's going on. But for the most part, everyone just kind of sees their clients and like goes about their day. In the practice I was before, it was a little bit more kind of like blended together. Like we would go ahead and collaborate a lot. We also offered social skills. So I had a lot of clients who like I'd be seeing for therapy. They'd also do social skills or they'd participate in a group and everything.
mhm,
So by being in a group practice, it really just kind of one, it opens up the ability to have other options for clients in the event that you don't work out for them. So being able to go ahead and have like your first step be, let's see if someone else in the practice can go ahead and work with you because for one, that stops you from having to check insurance again. That stops you from having to fill out intake paperwork again, which can sometimes
mhm,
be the biggest barriers. And so being able to kind of do that, it also goes ahead and offers kind of, I know in all the practices I've been in, they've been interdisciplinary. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker, but I work with licensed professional counselors, or previously I worked with, he was a play therapist as well as he had his doctorate in psychology. So getting to kind of go ahead and have those different perspectives of even just case conceptualization, like how do you work with an individual, sort of what do you try to do and everything. So for me, group practice has always been a really great way to have others to kind of rely on too.
I mean, I was going to ask you, but you already said it. So essentially, let me see if I understood this correctly.
Yeah.
Essentially, the practice would take care of sort of like all the market, like everything that has to do with the admin sort of stuff, like scheduling and stuff like that as well.
So at the practice I'm at now, I do my own scheduling, but they
Mm,
go ahead, they take care of like the platform that we have, they take care of advertising for us, they have billing and everything like that. So I still have the flexibility to work with clients to like set my own schedule. It's not like I have like 9 to 5 that I have to be there. Like we have at the practice I'm at now, there's hours that we go ahead and work as far as like seeing 20, 25, 30 clients. A lot of group practices can have like minimums like that sometimes.
mhm,
Just kind of depends. The practice I was at before, their minimum was like 10 hours a week. And so that was one where they had the option at that practice that I could either let the front handle my scheduling or I could handle
mhm.
it myself. So that had a little bit more flexibility in it, but it really does just kind of vary. Like ultimately, the idea with being in a group practice can go ahead and be either just renting space. Sometimes it's cheaper to be able to all rent the space together rather
Mhm,
than trying to go and find your own space. And
mhm,
other times it can even just be like all being under one name, can be easier for places to find you, right? Kind of getting that
mhm.
name recognition instead of having a bunch of individual therapists trying to build up like clientele and stuff like that. You can have the bigger group that gets the reputation and things like that.
So is this something that you have to sort of like monthly pay like a fee to be a part of it, like rent, or is it like that they give you like a check for the
So
hours
where
that
I
you
am
work?
currently, I'm an employee. So I go ahead, I
Oh,
get a
okay.
check, I get paid out and everything. I have seen some
Mhm,
practices where it is kind of more of like renting the space. Usually
mhm,
in those situations, you may not necessarily be affiliated with the practice. You may just rent the space and kind of have that worked out with the owners. And the practice I was at before, I was also an employee there too. So it's kind of one where they go ahead, they pay, like they get all the insurance and then they pay me out and everything.
I see, I see. Um, so are you doing in person primarily, or do you also do telehealth?
I do both. So I go ahead, I do in person as well as virtual. I have one day a week where I'm virtual, and then the rest of my days I go ahead and I have some flexibility where I have days that I'm predominantly in the office. And so most of my clients are in person, but I do still have the flexibility of sometimes, like, if someone needs that evening spot and everything, they might be a virtual. I'm just taking it from the office.
I've been thinking about this a lot. I was just yesterday, I think, I was talking to my brother about, I say that a lot. I should stop saying that. But it's true. I was talking to my brother. He's just like my soundboard a lot of the times. Sorry, David. He's gonna be editing this. um uh but I was thinking about, like, okay, so like how I was thinking about, like, because at the place where I work right now, I can make my own schedule essentially, and I was like, all right, cool. And then so like I said it in a way where I'm like, oh, I have like certain amount of breaks that I take, because I mean primarily I no not primarily, I only do telehealth at this point.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, I need a break here, I need a break here, and then that's where I'm gonna end, right? Or I'm gonna stick to these things, because a lot of the times, or in the past, I was kind of like, oh, if somebody really needs to be seen, then I guess I can add an extra one or something. But now I'm very sort of like, no, I'm sorry, these are my times, and I can't, switch them or whatever. I ended up adding like an extra day to it, and I think right now I see in between maybe like about 25 clients at this point,
Mhm.
like weekly, not the same ones. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But like, so how did you decide like how many clients is sort of your limit, and it will still allow you to have sort of like the lifestyle that you want financially, and also like sort of like make sure that you're taking care of yourself, because that's one of the things I was saying. If I could add more hours
Mhm.
to my schedule, but if I did that, I was just going to be exhausted the whole time. And I was like, I was just going to be sitting there like hating it, like working there, and I'm like, I don't want to do that, like it's such a disservice to whoever I'm working with, that I'm like so tired because I need to make more money, or like just because I have the time to be able to do that, right? So I'm just wondering, like,
Yeah.
what was your process to be able to figure it out?
So kind of twofold. So first was trial and error.
Mm,
There was
same.
definitely a lot of that starting out, like I said, I was in a practice when I was still doing my master's. And so that was one where I was financially a little bit more strapped and everything. Like I was the, sole provider for our family because my husband was also in his master's program.
Mhm,
So with that one, it was very much, I was paid hourly. And so it was one where I pushed myself a lot further. I took a lot of
mhm,
those like 7 o'clock clients where I wasn't getting home till after 8. And,
mm,
kind of just sort of realizing for myself that I'm like, this isn't it, right? Especially because I'd go ahead and I'd tell myself that I'm just going to do this one client and that, I'll get them out of that spot as soon as I can. And once you open that, that's where they'll stay. Like
mhm,
95% of the time, people do not want to move anywhere else. And so I kind of had to learn for myself that there will always be tons of people who want services and that I cannot save the world. And that was a really big thing for me is that, especially, we hear these stories and like people are here for a reason. And a lot of times, especially, as a social worker, I get that not necessarily savior complex, but like if I don't help, no one else will, right? Like I could be
mm,
such a good fit or, like this is a case that I think I could really like see an impact with and everything. And,
mhm,
I've had to go ahead and set boundaries for myself. And the second part of it for me was I had a really awesome supervisor. While I was going ahead and working towards my clinical license, I had a supervisor who was not afraid to yell at me when I was doing too much.
mhm,
And I have also had a super supportive husband who yells at me in the most loving way ever when I'm doing too much. When I go ahead, because I am also someone that, I had gone ahead. How we met was I'd reached out because I was super interested in what you were doing. I've also gone ahead in the past year. I was fortunate enough to get to write a book chapter with one of the psychologists I was working with that actually got published in like a book by Wiley talking about trauma and role playing games and everything. So, like, I had that going on. I've done conventions and stuff like that where I'm not just talking to general population, but I'm also trying to talk to, therapists and other mental health providers, trying to like really increase the awareness and what we do. And so, like, for me, finding that balance has been a lot of trial and error. It's been a lot of giving myself permission that, like, at a certain point, the money is not worth the, headache, the burnout, and things like that. And then also just learning what burnout looks like for me. I know that
Mhm.
I've had to go ahead and notice when I recede into myself and things like that. And sometimes I have to just write it out. I've gone ahead and in the past, I've ended up in therapy myself because I was feeling burnt out.
Mhm.
So a lot of it is just kind of having to listen to myself and find what I can do. I know that I've had to go ahead and like back off of like administrative tasks. So, like, in the role I have now, like I said, I'm primarily just a clinician, and that works a lot better for me. And it gives me the freedom to get to do other things, like getting to do this, or I have another book chapter that I'm working on, or I'm going to go ahead and be partnering with actually the university that I graduated from. I'm going to be working with them to go ahead and help like other MSW students and be a liaison there. So, like, there's all kinds of
Oh
other
my God.
things.
Are you going to do a class there?
I'm not going to do a class yet. That's the future goal. I'm
Yet.
like going to
I heard
infiltrate my
that.
way.
Yes, yes, yes. Right.
But like,
So kind of like, okay, that's kind of how I got started because I took a class and I absolutely loved it. And all of my
yeah.
friends were super jealous because they also want to take the class, but interfered with another class. And that was the only semester that they like ever that they
Oh,
offered it. And then so now I'm like, because I had a coworker last at my previous job that also worked at a university, and I was like, you should teach, geek culture and therapy and your thing. And he's like, I want to, but I'm not qualified. I was like, what do you mean you're not qualified? Like, it's the same. Like, like you're a nerd, stuff, how to
yeah.
apply it in therapy. Like, that's all you need.
Yeah.
Um, he did go ahead and get like some training for like TTRPGs and stuff to use those because he wanted like the extra sort of like knowledge and experience to be able to do that. But then I'm like, yeah, you should do more of those, like, yeah. And now I'm thinking of reaching out to like my local college too, and just being like, hey, I'm willing to do like a free presentation for your students to know that like psychology can be fun. Like, there's so many weird old people names you have to remember, so many theories that make no sense sometimes
Yeah.
for the populations that you're working with. Sometimes you have to scrap the whole thing and start anew.
Yeah,
I was,
definitely.
I was preparing a presentation the other day because I work a lot because I also provide services in Spanish, so a lot of work with
Okay.
I work a lot with the Latino population, and a lot of the times I'm like, yeah, this none of this works. Like, no, it's nice, but no.
Yeah.
Anyway, so then I was like, so I'm writing that in the presentation, and I'm like, there's so much that we need to know about it. But yeah,
Yeah. I
let
mean,
me know.
part of what I've tried to do that until I can make that leap into like academia and stuff like that is that I've been wanting to go ahead and kind of develop like continuing ed and everything like that, being able to go ahead and develop things for clinicians that are kind of being able to talk about like what geek culture is, how we can incorporate that, especially because, it's one where even for individuals who aren't geeks themselves, getting to kind of be able to follow the client's lead, being able to find, what do these things mean to them? I know that especially for me, one of the biggest things is even though I know all of these things and I'm familiar, right? If someone comes in talking to me about slime or solo leveling or something like that, like I have my own ideas, but ultimately I still take the time to sit down and say, okay, what does this mean to you? Right?
Mhm.
What do you relate to? What are the themes that you're picking up? How do you interpret this? Because this doesn't need to become a game of like, actually, or anything like that, but rather it's a way to peek into their world and to see what they understand, right? I've had clients who relate to like Naruto and everything and being able to understand like, okay, who do you relate to within Naruto? Like, are we talking
Mhm.
base Naruto or are we talking Shippuden? Like, what are we talking here? Like, what's
Yeah.
going on? Kind of being able to see how people view the world through all of that.
You know what? That's one of the things that. Wait, let me fix this. One of the things that I say is like, it's a culture. Like
Mhm.
and we talk about like, oh, if you work with a specific population, you need to be aware at least of some things, within that culture, be have some sort of competence in it. And I'm like, you also have to have it in this, because there's so many of us that geeks and nerds that don't really reach out because it's uncomfortable. We're not into like the traditional things. I say something about like, cosplay or whatever, and people are like, what?
What's
Like that
that?
that's already like, never mind, I don't want to talk to you about it,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Like it's just very deflating. But if you are at least somewhat aware of like what cosplay is, right, then you
Mhm.
can at least be like, okay, yes, I heard of it. Like, what did you like to call? Like, it's totally different, even if you don't know anything about it. So like,
Yeah.
I'm always being like, yeah, just you kind of have to know a little bit. And I'm like, because not only would it bring a sort of like whole new population, like you were saying, like people reach out to you and they're like, is this a reference to whatever, right? And I'm like, yeah, because people are hungry to be able to do that. And I'm like, at this point, I'm like, we need to do whatever we can as a field to reduce those negative stigma
Mhm.
on mental health, because there's way too much, right?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, it can be fun and it can be entertaining, like to talk to someone about your hobbies and you learn about mental health. And
Mhm.
it's a lot easier to do sort of like quote unquote homework, right?
Yeah.
I call them side quests. um and because it is like, oh, go watch a movie or watch an episode of this and think about whatever, right? And
Yeah.
then I'm gonna be like, you're telling me to go watch this, oh, I guess it's for my mental health, I gotta do it now, right?
Yeah.
Like it's so much easier than be like, oh, you have to sit there and practice and meditate, or
Yeah.
whatever. So it's yeah.
Yeah, and it's also one that like as we're kind of going about like so much of even just geek culture is becoming mainstream too, right? Like you love Loki
Mhm.
and thinking about like superheroes. Like growing up, you would have those as comics. Those weren't giant blockbuster things, and now you have the whole Marvel, or like there is a theme park for Marvel. Like that is a thing now. You can go to
Mhm.
Avengers Tower in California. Like that is a thing. And then like looking at like Stranger Things, like the everything in that is based on D&D, like
Mhm.
Vecna, Demogorgons, all of it.
Mhm.
And even looking at like, I know I was literally talking with a client about the fact that Dimension 20, which is all the people from like College Humor and stuff who now have
Mhm.
like their own, they've got Dropout TV. They sold out Madison Square Gardens in New York for a live play that they are going to do. Like they are going to go ahead and have a live show where they run a like campaign that they're doing, and they sold out Madison Square Gardens. Like that is, I know Critical Role is doing one out in California too. They've got Candela Obscura, as well as
Mhm.
they are doing I think they're doing one for their current campaign. I think, but like just these ideas that these things that they're not just, small little groups going ahead. You have these huge events and people are going ahead, even looking at conventions, right? I know growing up for me, like Comic-Con was always like the really big one that we heard about for like San Diego and everything. But like now you have things like I know this weekend is MomoCon out in Atlanta, Georgia, or there's Dragon Con here in up here in New Jersey. We've got the Geekdom Come that's happening. We've got PAX East that happens. We've got New York Comic Con that happens. There's one in August that's Anime New Jersey, like or Anime New York. Like conventions have become such a huge thing, and so part of this too is that it is becoming more pervasive in culture, right? I know that I've shopped at Hot Topic like my whole entire life, and seeing how it has all changed, seeing more anime culture and stuff like that, even just seeing the accessibility of like subs and dubs now, that like I'm not having to like go on to like Kiss Anime and like hope that somebody fan dubbed it.
On YouTube, I'm trying to find the like part 13 of like 27.
And it's like only a 30-minute episode, but it's broken into like 50 parts.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, you said Hot Topic, and I was like, okay, I remember being like young, like middle school probably, and like we will walk by, and I was like, it's so scary.
Now you have like I swear I've walked
I'm
by
like, that's the only story the
Sasuke
wall.
staring at me. They don't
Yeah,
even like play like heavy metal music or anything anymore. Like I've had Kitty staring at me from Hot Topic before. Like all the time
yeah.
that I've seen both My Hero and Jujutsu Kaisen do crossovers with Hello Kitty.
Oh yeah, and no, Hello Kitty like got a revival because of all the crossovers that it was doing with like everyone.
Hello Kitty was
Yeah,
just like, "Anybody, like, come here." But, like,
yeah.
ultimately, like, so much of it goes ahead and, like, I've worked with individuals about, like, Steven Universe as being something to process
Mhm,
emotions, especially if you watch Future, because, like, that is just Steven Universe Future is just about dealing with trauma or
mhm.
the lack thereof. And then, like, even looking at things like Avatar: The Last Airbender and Korra, or being able to go ahead and look at, like, Adventure Time and, like, how that goes ahead and shifts. And, I love talking to people about, like, Agretsuko because, like, Agretsuko is amazing and, like, talking about how, like, sometimes she just needs to rage and everything.
Yeah. Okay, okay. I don't want to like we could be here for like another 3 hours. I don't want to take too much of your time anymore. But okay. So you mentioned that you're reaching out. So it sounds like, but I want everybody to hear from you. You are open to collabs, open to doing not supervision, but wait, what's it called? When
Like,
consultations.
consultation? Yeah.
Yeah, consultations and like are you open to doing supervision?
So presently, I am not able to do supervision yet. I only just got my clinical license in April. So, like, I am a new little baby, at least as far as clinical goes.
Mm-hmm.
Been in this for like 4 years. It was one of those where, like, the whole time I was working towards my supervision, everyone's like, yeah, you're just waiting out the clock. Like, you should just be licensed. And I'm like, tell the board that. But going ahead, I just got my license. So in New Jersey, it's 3 years before you can go ahead and, like, actually clinically supervise. But I am open to, like, consultations and things like that. I am open to going ahead and doing collaborations and stuff. I know that I'm very big on wanting to try and develop, like, continuing education credits, or, being able to especially make it so that, individuals, I know, like, for me here in New Jersey, it was so hard to find, like, social work specific continuing education that is also, like, geeky. Like, so much of what I see
Mm.
is, the same trauma training like 50 times. And I'm like, okay, trauma is important, but, like, I'd like this a different way. Like, can we talk about trauma in anime? Like, can we do that?
Listen, listen. I was telling my brother, what was I saying? Oh, so for my job, they giving us the opportunity to do like presentations on something that we we love, and some of the presentations I have nothing. I'm sorry, I don't have nothing against the presenters, but I'm like that sounds so boring.
Yeah.
I'm like I don't, I don't want to go to that.
Yeah.
I like that. It's like it because one, the title is always like a bunch of big words, and I'm
Yeah.
like that. My ADHD brain already goes like, ugh, and a lot of the times it's the same thing
Mhm.
over and over again, and then I'm like, yeah, but there's other things that we can talk about. And then I'm like, let me tell you, let me tell you what we could talk about. Yeah, so I'm trying to do that for my job as well. But okay, wait, hold on. If somebody is interested in reaching out, are you taking clients at this time or no?
So I am currently taking clients. They can go ahead. I'm licensed in New Jersey. I do telehealth. Individuals can find me on Psychology Today. My name is Shelby Summers. I'm in, like, the Dunville, New Jersey area is usually where I pop up and everything. So you can reach out to me there, be able to get a hold of me to kind of get scheduled and everything like that. Aside from that, as far as, like, collabs and things like that, I do also have, like, a LinkedIn page where people would be able to go ahead and reach out and collab there. And I have, like, my email and everything. So I'm definitely open to people wanting to go ahead and reach out. I'm happy to share that as well if it, like, needs to go in, like, the link or description or something like that.
Yes, I think it will make it easier
Yeah.
because I know that I forget things as soon as I hear them. So it would be easier to have a reminder there. So we will have that information at the bottom as well for everybody to make it easier. And one last question. Wow, it's
Mhm.
already been like an hour and a half. um, is if somebody wanted to join a group practice or open their own private practice, what would you recommend for them to do?
So, one thing I would certainly recommend, take your time, like, being able to go ahead. If you're looking to join a group practice, definitely know that you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. So, being able to kind of know, like, what are you looking for? Are you someone who can work really well independently. I know that sometimes this field can be a really isolating one. So if you need more collaboration, if you need, more kind of camaraderie and things like that, knowing that about yourself to be able to then ask, that practice, like, what do they do? Do they do case consultations? Do they do, kind of like group supervisions or things like that? Is this just one where everyone kind of like fends for themselves? It's also important to know like referral sources. Like if you were going ahead and you're working, a lot of what we do is per diem work. There's not a lot of times where it's just hourly or salary. So being able to know that, okay, if it's per diem and say that the pay is really great, how hard is it going to be to get clients, right? What is a realistic expectation of how quickly you will go ahead and fill up? Because ultimately we work with people and we all have lives, and lives can be unpredictable. So things come up and stuff happens. And so being able to kind of know that, especially if this is something you're relying on for your income, whether it's at a group practice or even striking out on your own, it will take time, right? Being able to build those referral sources, being able to build what that looks like, and also being able to make sure that something is a good fit for you rather than just going ahead and trying to fit into a specific mold. I know that especially, if you're interested in like group practices or private practices, Facebook has been a huge wealth of like different groups that I see. Like I mentioned being in like a geek therapy group. I'm also in a billion of them that are just for like the New Jersey area, that are other like therapists, that are like practices, like being able to pick the brains of other people who have done it and not being afraid to like ask like, hey, this is something I want to do. Can I please talk to you about it? Like we live in a world where like it can be so isolating. So just not being afraid to reach out to ask and say, hey, can I please go ahead and like ask you about this and like get some help? Because I have found that most people are more than willing to go ahead and help out. It's just that no one asks, so we never get the opportunity.
Listen, listen. You really need to stop reading my mind. That's what I was gonna say. Like, I mean, that's exactly like what happened to me. I reached out to someone. I actually talked to Dr. Gamology. He was one of my very first interviews that I did, and then he was just like, yeah, there's a lot of people, like, because he's a professor as well. He said like, yeah, students just kind of go off and you never hear from them, or sometimes they're kind of like me, you're just asking like, oh, so how do you do this, like what's going on, like how can I do that too, and then
Yeah.
he's like, we're happy to help, and I was like, are you? And then like talk to someone else, Charlene from Nat 20, and then she was like, yeah, I'm happy to answer your questions anytime. And then I'm like, that that's not the right thing to say to me. And now I'm like, yes, you have to collab with me now. You're one of my people. So now I'm like collecting all the geeky events and providers, and I'm like, we need to do collabs and geek out and have fun. Anyway, thank you
We've
so
got to like
much.
find someone who's like super creative to make like Pokemon cards of all of us, like just like have our own Pokemon cards for you to
That would be
collect.
so
Those can
awesome.
be
And then
little
like at the
captions for when you
bottom
go
it will
ahead.
have like our specialties and stuff, or like the fandoms that we're
Yeah.
into. Oh, that would be so awesome. I should do
That and when you do
that.
like
Just
videos like this, you can just have like our little like Pokemon, like almost like your team, like your starter team. That'd be great.
I imagine myself like, back in the day where the kids would be like selling the newspapers. I'll be me like with a bunch of Pokemon cards, like, so which therapist are you looking for? Which therapist are you looking for? What state are you looking
Who did
into?
you want to go ahead and meet?
Yeah. Okay, wait. Yeah, so all the information will be down there. We'll work on those Pokemon cards for everyone. I was to say, thank you so much for joining us today. And you guys, I have no idea when this is coming out, but stay tuned. Do subscribe to her channel, because she will be back. We are planning at least two other panels that are so very interesting. One is kind of geeky, and the other one not as much, but both very interesting. I don't want to reveal too much information because I don't know what will be out by then, by the time this is
I was
out.
gonna say,
So
hopefully they don't
just
come out in different orders. Like this happen and then this comes out.
yeah, so yeah, so stay tuned for that. Do subscribe, share this video with other people's, so we can have more of this. Do write in the comments if you have any questions. What are your favorite animes? What are your favorite isekais? What would be the isekai that is the most like you? Like, what would it be? Konosuba? Would it be like the slime one? Like, what is it that your life will be like if you realistically, if you were to be isekai'd? um and also check the Psychology for Geeks website. We have a lot of in-person events as well that we are doing. Not only that, but we also have a lot of like really cool things planned. So stay tuned, follow us on our socials. Check out our Patreon as well. We have a Patreon to be able to make this possible. Right now I'm working with like the bare minimum stuff, but we want to make it better. We want to have more of these. So if you're interested in that, check out our Patreon. And yeah, thank you so much, Shelby, for joining us today and for kicking out with me, for all the wisdom that you shared. And even if you read my mind a lot of the times, it's okay. I really enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun. Um, and
Thank you
yeah,
so much for having me. Thank you so much for letting me geek out for a little bit and getting me to go ahead and share a little bit of this. I love getting to talk about what we do and really just working to like destigmatize so much of it.
exactly, that's the whole point of everything. So yeah, all that being said, thank you so much for making it to the end of this video, and don't forget to reframe and re-enchant your life, and I'll see you in whatever the next video is. Bye.